Hi, I'm Alexis from Remy Crafty Hedgehog, and I wrote a cute pattern for this fall pumpkin bookmark. It's all worked flat, so it's a great pattern for beginners. If you would like the full written pattern, it's available on my website, which I link below, and this video has a full step-by-step tutorial on how to do every single step so that you can have a cute fall pumpkin bookmark to add to all your spooky books this season. Happy spooky season!
So let's take a peek at this pumpkin bookmark. It's really easy, it's all worked flat, and it's a great thing for a beginner to try out. You can use some scrap yarn that you've lying around because it really doesn't take very much. Let's get started. The first thing that you need is a 5mm crochet hook. Then you need worsted weight yarn in an orange color. I'm using Red Heart Super Saver in Carrot. And you need worsted weight yarn in green. I'm also using Red Heart Super Saver in Patty Green. Then you need about a golf ball size amount of polyfill. And not one, but 2 stitch markers. And you need a darning needle and a pair of scissors. The first thing we're going to do is make a slip knot. Everybody makes slip knots in their own way, and each one is fine because they all end up making a slip knot. My preferred method is to wrap the yarn around 2 fingers and cross them over to create an X shape, like this. Then I open up that loop a little bit, go in with my pinchers, and grab that far left piece of yarn and pull it through to create a loop. And bingo bango, there is your slip knot. Your slip knot doesn't have to be super tight, just tight enough that it doesn't come off. You want to be able to wiggle it around a little bit. Now I'm going to get ready to hold tension in my yarn, which is just a fancy way of saying that I'm going to get the yarn ready so that I can grab it very easily. My preferred method is to wrap it around my pinky like so, and then run it over the back of my hand. But everybody has their own way of holding tension. You got to find what works for you. Now I'm going to start making my chain stitches, which means I'm going to yarn over my hook, and then pull that yarn through the loop on my hook, creating my very first chain stitch. Here I'll give you a little close-up view. Yarn over, pull through the loop. Now I've created my second chain stitch. Here comes number 3, and number 4, and number 5. And last but not least, number 6. So now I'm going to get ready to do row 1, which means I'm going to be doing single crochets into the chain stitches that I just made. There are 2 ways generally people do this. Either they put their single crochets into one of these loops on the front, or they turn their work slightly and enter in through the back bump, like the spine of the chain stitch. The back bump does give a nicer aesthetic look. It is a little bit harder to get into than those front loops. You can do either one in this pattern and your bookmark will turn out beautifully. Let me demo entering one of these loops on the front. See how easy that is? The only problem is you end up with that little bit of gapping. I prefer the back bump method, so that's what I will be doing here. You can see I slightly rotated my work so I could see those bumpy spine bits. And then I'm going to use the pointed part of my crochet hook to get in underneath. Now I'm going to finish making my single crochet by yarning over and pulling through. Yarning over and pulling through both loops on my hook. And that is the first single crochet of row 1. And I'm going to place my stitch marker here to help me find it later. I'll be placing it underneath both legs of the crochet stitch so that I can find it more easily later. With a pattern like this, you want to be very diligent about adding your stitch markers at either side as you go up and down so you don't lose track of which one is the actual end. If you are trying to make rectangles and you often end up making trapezoids, that's most likely why, and if you added a stitch marker at either side, it would solve that problem for you immediately. I'm going to continue single crocheting my way across till I end up with 5 completed single crochets. Red Heart Super Saver yarn is notorious for splitting, and that's happening to me right now, but just with a little bit of manipulation I can slide it all back onto the hook so the yarn is no longer split. Now I've completed my 5th single crochet. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And now I'm going to chain 1 to finish the row. Now for every row moving forward, we will turn our work and then continue working from right to left. I'm going to use my darning needle to show you what stitch we're going to work into. You want to work into the second stitch from your hook, which is not this chain stitch, but actually this single crochet. As you can see, it's the second stitch from our hook, and you're going to go under both loops. So I'm going to take my crochet hook, and I'm going to enter underneath both loops, yarn over, pull through, yarn over and pull through both loops on my hook, and that is a completed single crochet, the first of row 2. I'm going to put my stitch marker on so that I know where I begin and where I end. And then I'm going to continue doing row 2, adding the remaining single crochets. This is number 2. This is number 3. This is number 4. And this is number 5. And now with the chain, that is row 2 completed. Rows 3 through 19 follow the same pattern. You're just going to do 5 single crochets across, chain, turn, repeat over and over and over again till you have 19 rows completed. I'm going to show you again with rows 3 and 4, and then I'm going to zoom through the rest. So I'm going to turn my work and get ready to start row 3 by entering into the second stitch from my hook. And there I go. I'm going to make my first single crochet, and then I'm going to put my stitch marker in place because it is very important with this type of pattern to use stitch markers. Then I'm going to complete doing the rest of the single crochets across. That's 2, 3, 4, and 5. Then I'll make my chain stitch, and that's row 3 completed. Now to move on to row 4, I'm going to take my stitch marker off, and then I'm going to turn my work, and then I will begin by single crocheting into the second stitch from my hook, number 2, single crochet, then add my stitch marker, and then I'm going to continue along till I reach the end of this row and make my chain stitch. Alright, that's the 5th single crochet in row 4. Now I'm going to make my chain stitch, and now row 4 is complete. As I said earlier, the rest of the rows follow the same type of pattern. Once you get the hang of the pattern, you will be zooming through it, making an entire pumpkin patch of pumpkin bookmarks. Alright, we've reached row 19. Let's single crochet our way across. That's 1 single crochet, and we put our stitch marker on. 2 single crochets. 3 single crochets. 4. and 5. Then we make our chain stitch, and that is all 19 rows completed. By this point, your pumpkin rectangle should be about 5 inches long and 1.5 inches wide. Now we're going to cut a very long tail, about 18 inches, because we're going to use it later to cinch the pumpkin shut and add the ribbing. And we're going to pull that yarn tail through and then tighten that final chain stitch. At this point, the pattern refers to 2 different yarn tails. One is significantly shorter, as you can see here, and the other at the opposite end is much, much longer. And they are each referred to as the shorter yarn tail or the longer yarn tail, respectively. Next, we're going to use the shorter yarn tail and our darning needle to sew the short sides of the pumpkin together. Sew the 2 short sides of the pumpkin together using about 5 stitches. Try to grab yarn that's on the outer edge so that you can create a more seamless join that's not so bulky. There are a couple different methods to sew it together. You can either go backwards and forwards like this, or you can enter in from the same side over and over again. Both will create a lovely effect, and you can choose which way you like best. I like to do the mattress stitch, which is this backwards and forwards version. What matters most is that once you're done sewing that side shut, you do not pull it super tight because you will end up distorting your pumpkin. Once we reach the tippity top of that corner, we're going to sew through one more time and create a little knot. That way, when we cinch the pumpkin shut later, we won't accidentally cinch the side as well. And just pull that knot nice and tight. Now we have what looks a little bit more like a pumpkin-themed wrist sweatband, but I promise soon it will look very pumpkin-y. We're going to do 20 stitches around this side and then cinch it all shut. If you're worried about spacing your stitches correctly, just fold your work in half, and then you can see that you just need to do 10 on each side, and that makes it a little bit more manageable. You can also recognize that at the top of each of these columns, you're going to put about 2. So each one would have 2, resulting in 10 on each side, resulting in 20 in total. Just like before, you want to try and grab the stitches that are right on the edge. That way you get a nice close cinch. I'm going to speed this section up so that you can see the end result. Now we're going to carefully pull our yarn so that we can cinch the pumpkin shut. You want to make sure you don't accidentally snap your yarn, so you might need to help move the stitches around a little bit. Now in the end, you don't want a tight cinch where there's no hole because you want to be able to pull the stem through it, so it's okay if you have a hole about the size of a pencil in there. Then we're going to run our darning needle inside of the pumpkin, slip it under a stitch nearby, tie a nice knot with it, pull it tight, and now we're done with this side. Now we're going to take the much longer yarn tail and we're going to do the same thing to the other side, but before we pull it shut and cinch it, we're going to add the polyfil to stuff the pumpkin. You really don't need a lot of polyfill to stuff this pumpkin, and you certainly don't want it overstuffed because then later you won't be able to run your stem through it. If you're worried about having trouble with the stem, you can make kind of like a donut with your polyfill before you add it to the pumpkin. Now let's go ahead and pull that yarn so that we can cinch the second side shut. Then just make a nice tight knot under any stitch to secure that cinch. Now to add the ribbing to our pumpkin, we're simply going to run our darning needle and all of that excess yarn over and around the outside and back up through the middle 6 times, pulling each time a little bit tight, but not too tight, so that we get a nice kind of ribbing, fluted effect. If you place each section sort of opposite the other, it just gives you an easier time trying to arrange things in a nice uniform way. Now we're going to secure those cinches by just weaving our needle under any stitch nearby, tie a nice tight knot, and then we simply weave our needle through the center of the pumpkin, trim off the excess, and the pumpkin portion is done. Just look at how cute it looks! Now we're moving on from making the pumpkin to making the stem and the leaf. The leaf and the stem are all worked in one piece. And I realized as I was filming this video that it's very similar in color to my background, so I'm going to use a piece of cardstock here just to add a little color diversity. So let's take our green yarn and we're going to make a slip knot. Again, there are so many ways to make slip knots, but my favorite method is to loop it around my fingers and cross it, creating an X. Then I open the loop slightly, go in with my pinchers and grab that far left piece, pull it through, and bingo bango, there is my slip knot, ready to slide onto my crochet hook. Now let me get my tension ready, and then we're going to chain 1. Now this chain stitch is special. We're going to be working into it several times to create the leaf. So to make it easier, I'm going to put a stitch marker in. You can either work into that loop there or the back bump. It doesn't really matter. Both will give you a beautiful leaf. The back bump again is a little bit harder to see, but it does give a little bit nicer of an effect. I'm going to be going into the back bump, so I'm going to be putting my stitch marker on that back bump to make it easier for me to find it later. Now I'm going to chain 3. The next step is to double crochet into that stitch that I have the marker placed on. To double crochet, we're going to yarn over before we enter the stitch. So you can see I yarned over and I have 2 loops and I'm entering the stitch. Now I'm going to yarn over again and pull through one of the loops, and now I have 3 loops on my hook. Now I'm going to yarn over and pull through 2, then yarn over and pull through 2 more. That is a completed double crochet, and we will be repeating this 2 more times. So there I go, yarning over, entering that stitch, yarning over and pulling through, yarning over and pulling through 2, yarning over and pulling through 2 again, 1 more double crochet to make so far, yarn over, enter the stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over and pull through 2 at a time, yarn over and pull through 2 at a time again. We have just finished all 3 double crochet. Now to make the pointed tip of the leaf, we're going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3. Then we're going to fold our chain stitches back and work back this way, mirroring the leaf on the other side. You can do this in a couple of different ways. We're either going to slip stitch under these angular stitches, which is my preferred method, under 2 loops there, or you can slip stitch under the top of the double crochet you just made. Either method works and makes a beautiful result. So now I'm going to slip stitch under these two angular stitches, and to slip stitch, I simply enter the stitches, yarn over and pull through, and then I continue to pull through the loop that's on my hook. Just like that. And there you can see the tip of the leaf is created. Now I'm going to create 3 double crochets and put them all into the stitch that has my marker. So there I am yarning over and entering the stitch, yarning over again, pulling through. Now I have 3 loops on my hook, yarning over and pulling through 2 at a time. That's 1 double crochet, and I'm going to repeat that 2 more times. Now I'm going to create 3 chain stitches and slip stitch into that same stitch that has my marker again. This will mirror the other side and create a beautiful symmetrical leaf. Look at how cute that leaf has come out. Now to make the stem, I'm going to make 45 chain stitches. I'm going to zoom this part up because I know you guys are chain stitch pros by now. Now I'm making my 45th chain stitch. Look how pretty that looks. It's gonna fit perfectly in a book. Now on this 45th chain stitch, I will be adding a stitch marker to help me in this next step. I'm continuing to work in the back bump as I have throughout the pattern. And now I'm going to chain 1. And then I'm gonna turn back and start single crocheting my way back down my chain, starting with the stitch that I put the marker on. You can see me putting a single crochet into it here. Normally I would put a stitch marker on it, but I don't need to at this point because I know that's the end. Now I'm going to do 2 more single crochets, making my way down the stem. Now that I finished my single crochet, I'm going to chain 1. And then I'm going to cut about a 5-inch tail and pull it through, and then pull that chain stitch tight. We have just finished the stem, and now it's time to put it inside of our pumpkin. Now the easiest way to get the stem up through the pumpkin is to create kind of like a little lasso harness thing for it. So we're going to take a scrap bit of yarn, put it on our darning needle, then run our darning needle through the top of the stem. Then we're going to take the other end of that scrap yarn and put it through our darning needle again. It doesn't matter if it's going from the same direction or opposite directions, just hold on to it carefully. Then we're going to take that darning needle and run it up through the middle of our pumpkin. Choose which side you think is prettier to be the top. With a good tug, your stem should just pop right through. Pew! Now you can remove the lasso, pull out that extra yarn tail, and then adjust the stem so that it abuts the pumpkin just right. Now we're going to use that yarn tail and our darning needle to sew the stem into place. Pick any stitch nearby and weave your needle underneath, then back through the stem and tie a nice tight knot. Place a few more stitches just around the stem to help secure it even better. Once your stem feels secure, feel free to trim off the extra end. Now all that's left is to weave in the ends of the leaf. Use your darning needle to run the yarn under a few stitches, then come up and out, skip a stitch and turn back going the direction that you just came. This will help make sure that it doesn't unravel later, and it'll secure that end in nice and tight. Now trim off the excess, and you're done. Look at your cute pumpkin bookmark. I think it's ready for a spooky book. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed making your perfectly petite pumpkin bookmark. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe and like so you can see what other cool stuff I make.